Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for inviting me here today. I want to first of all, it was a real pleasure and an honor to work with Cindy. For many years when I was at LSU, I was on the Honors College Board, worked very closely with honors students, and it was one of the best parts of the job, and working with you was one of the best parts of that experience. So thank you for your introduction. Today is a day that kind of relates to my previous book. This is September 10th, and 90 years ago today was when Huey Long died here in Baton Rouge, not too far from here at the old Our Lady of the Lake Hospital. And the day before yesterday was the funeral of Carl Weiss, who had when his funeral was held at St. Joseph's Cathedral downtown. Huey Long was still alive, so he was not considered the assassin, but the person who had shot Huey Long, and by the next day he would be considered the assassin. And I'm not going to get into that whole controversy here today, but I will say that I wrote a piece about it on my Substack yesterday. That funeral held 90 years ago yesterday here in Baton Rouge was the largest, best attended funeral of an American political assassin in our nation's history. The incumbent congressman was there, the former governor John Parker was there, the district attorney was there, every physician in town was there. There were over 1,000 people who came to honor the person who had just shot a U.S. senator. So the piece I wrote was to say, you think our times are divided and turbulent today, and they are. Go back to 90 years ago in this town, when this city and much of the state was under martial law. And people felt like that the only way they could get out from under that was to assassinate, was to kill the U.S. senator. Tomorrow, September 11th, would be it's not only the anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, but it would be the 126th birthday of Jimmie Davis. He was born on September 11th, 1899. So there's some significant dates. It's been really fun talking about the book. And it's really, to me, it means a lot to a lot of people. I'm always impressed with how many people know this song and remember this song. How many of you had this song sung to you when you were children? Yeah. And how many of you have sung this song to your children or grandchildren? Yes. Yeah, so it is. And if I was speaking to a group in London, and I can promise you, if I was speaking to a group in Tokyo, I would get the same response. This song is universal. It's known all over the world. Very popular in Japan. At one time, Jimmie Davis said most of his royalties, or the greatest part of his royalties from You Are My Sunshine, were from Japan, of all places. So it's the most recognizable, one of the most recognizable songs in the world. And it's our state song because, as legend has it, it was written in the mid-1920s at LSU by Jimmie Davis, who would go on to become a Louisiana governor. You may not realize this, but You Are My Sunshine doesn't mention the words Louisiana anywhere. In fact, I think it's the only state song, as best I can tell, it's the only state song that doesn't actually mention the state. And Tennessee, I think, has 13 state songs, and all of them mention Tennessee. But ours does not, and the reason it's the state song is because of the legend that Jimmie Davis wrote it while at LSU, and it became a world famous song. But as I learned in the research, that's not exactly that story is not true, and we'll get into that in a minute here. But I not only learned about the story of the song, but also about Jimmie Davis, who I had known a little bit during my reporting career in the 80s. And saw him a few times when I went into politics and was around him a little bit, but didn't know him well. But I thought I knew who he was, and I thought I knew something about him. I thought he was mostly a politician who dabbled in music, who used music as a stepping stone into politics. My research revealed to me that Davis was a singer who dabbled in politics. I thought it was the opposite. I thought that he used his music to support his political career, when in fact he used his politics to support his musical career. So he was the first elective office he had, and he was already a well-known singer at the time, was public service commissioner, public safety commissioner in Shreveport in the late 1930s. And he'd already had several hits to his name. One of the first things he did when he got elected to the job was he made all his band members police officers. And the reason he did that is because he wanted to keep the band together, and there wasn't a whole lot of money in hillbilly music in those days. And so to keep the band together, he gave them jobs. They were all police officers. I met the son of his trumpet player earlier this year, and he said, I always wondered why Dad was a police officer. And he used politics. When he became governor, he gave all his band members safe jobs. But I want to jump ahead here. There's a really interesting story about Jimmie Davis's early life and here in Baton Rouge and elsewhere. But I want to jump ahead to his first campaign for governor in 1944-43. By that time, he was a really well-known, world-famous country music star, hillbilly star. They didn't really call it country music yet, called it hillbilly music. He had a number of national hits that are still country music standards. Nobody's Darling But Mine was a big hit in 1935. A lot of people have recorded that over the years. It Makes No Difference Now that he recorded it in 1938. There's other songs where there's A Chill on the Hill Tonight, Sweethearts Are Strangers, Baby Your Mother, on and on and on. A lot of hits. He was really a well-known country music star around the world. People knew him. But he was the elected Public Safety Commissioner in Shreveport and the Public Service Commissioner for North Louisiana when he was running for governor in 1944. And there was also You Are My Sunshine, which he recorded and released in 1940, and which had become by the 1943-44 one of the most popular and well-known songs in the world. And so he was running for governor on the strength of his recording career, on his notoriety, and on his his image as a cowboy bard who wrote these wonderful songs and had this incredible gift of music and of musical poetry. But Sunshine was the song that was the biggest of the hits. And it was a big hit because other artists had recorded it. Gene Autry had recorded it, Tex Ritter, and they had both sung it in their movies. Bing Crosby had made a big national hit out of it in 1941, and Jimmie Davis had gone to Hollywood and sung it in a couple of movies before he's running for governor. So Davis is not only running for governor as a country music star, a hillbilly star, but also a movie star. So he's got a lot of star power as he's going around the country singing these songs. But most of his notoriety is from this song "You Are My Sunshine" that he recorded and released in March of 1940. I want to just play you a little bit of that song so you get a feel of. I call him a hillbilly singer, but he was really this is a very much of a jazz version of that song with a little hillbilly flavor, but it's a beautiful recording.
The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. But when I woke, dear, I was mistaken, and I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
So I won't play the whole thing, but you get a sense. This was really good music, and he had really good musicians, and that was one of the reasons why people came out to see him. Is I think arguably Jimmie Davis had the best band in country music at the time. I mean, again, these were people who had the promise of state jobs if they won the election, but they were really good musicians. Two of the band members, two of the people in that troupe are now members of the Country Music Hall of Fame. These were first-rate musicians, and these songs and the image that they helped him create were propelling him into this governor's race. He didn't have a whole lot of government experience, and it was really people would come to hear him sing. They weren't interested in hearing him talk about politics. In fact, he maybe talked for 10 minutes about policy. His main promise was, I'm not going to make any promises. Let's get to the singing, and he would sing, and people were pouring out of the woodwork and all these little small towns to hear Jimmie Davis and his band sing. That's what they came for, and he gave it to them. But in that race, he had a couple of really significant potential problems that he was having to deal with. And one of them was that he didn't actually write the song that he was most famous for. That he had told people, and by the way, he told people to the end of his life that he wrote the song, and he had a bunch of several different contradicting stories about it. None of them really made a whole lot of sense, but Jimmie Davis this is a spoiler alert for the book, Jimmie Davis did not write the song. This guy here wrote the song. His name, the one in the middle, the mandolin player, his name is Oliver Hood, who lived in LaGrange, Georgia. In fact, Cindy and I are going to be spending the night in LaGrange tomorrow night. I was going to have lunch on Friday with Oliver's grandson, David Crook, who I interviewed a number of times for the book. But Oliver Hood was a mandolin player, a music teacher, a mill worker, and a pretty well-known musician in that part of Georgia, in and around LaGrange and in the Atlanta area. And it's pretty well documented that he wrote the song in the late 20s, early 30s. He was clearly, a lot of people in and around LaGrange remember him singing, Oliver Hood singing the song, performing the song in public in the early 1930s in LaGrange. The song got away from him, and his grandson thinks it got away from him. It's a kind of a crazy story, but there was through another musician that he had an affair with, who was later jilted and probably gave the song to some other groups. And so he never copyrighted the song. The song got away from him. And so by 1939, this group here, another group from Georgia, that Oliver Hood and the red-haired girl from South Carolina was the one that the family thinks that he had the affair with. She was a singer, and she probably sang that song for these two brothers, and they recorded it in Atlanta in August of 1939, the Pine Ridge Boys, and it was a very country, very hillbilly version of it. A month later, this group, Paul and Hoke Rice, the Rice Brothers Gang, they call themselves, they recorded the song also in Atlanta. And about a month, less than a month after they recorded and released the song, the Rice Brothers band, Paul and Hoke Rice, moved to Shreveport and got a radio show on KWKH, where Jimmie Davis also had a radio show on KWKH. They started singing on the Saturday Night Roundup, which is the precursor to the Louisiana Hayride. Jimmie Davis was singing on the Saturday Night Roundup. In December of that year, Paul Rice, who claimed he had written the song, which he didn't, but he claimed he wrote the song, his wife got sick and they needed money for his medical bills, and Jimmie Davis and Charlie Mitchell, the steel guitar player, needed a new song, and they went to Paul Rice and offered him $35 for the rights to You Are My Sunshine. So it cost Jimmie Davis $17.50 to buy the most popular song in the world, the song that made him millions of dollars. And people in and around Shreveport, the Shreveport Times, and a lot of his political enemies knew this story. It was pretty well known that Jimmie Davis didn't write the song that he claimed he did, that he copyrighted it in January of 1940, claimed that he and Charlie Mitchell wrote the words and lyrics and claimed the song as their own, and got rich off of it, and got famous for writing a song that people in and around Shreveport knew that he didn't write, and they were threatening to make this, the Shreveport Times and others were threatening to make this a real problem for him in his campaign, to really undermine the image that he was running on, which was as this cowboy bard. You know, that was that sort of wholesome image of the cowboy, and that's what he also played in his movies, and that's the image that these were westerns that he was performing in and singing in, and this is the image that he projected. It was, you know, very wholesome image, and one that was really centered around his musical ability, and particularly his ability to write really beautiful music. I'm not confident that he wrote many of those songs that he claimed he did. I know some Nobody's Darling he didn't write, and some of those other songs he did not write those songs. He bought those from other down and out musicians. But what protected, and this is some really interesting. Some of these were never published before. These were taken by a Life magazine reporter who followed the campaign around as they went around through rural parts of Louisiana with the band performing in 1943-44. And it was the music that people just didn't want to believe that Jimmie Davis didn't write the song. I'm telling you, people today don't want to hear this. They're not happy when I tell them the story. So you can imagine, in his time, people didn't want to hear this story either. But it was that image of Jimmie Davis as the cowboy bard, and their deep desire to believe the myth, which I think is still very much a prevalent thing in our culture today. We want to believe the myth. We want to believe what we want to believe. that protected him. So that charge, that allegation, that truth never really hurt Davis at all in that campaign or anywhere even after that. But he had even a bigger problem in that race, more so than the disputed authorship of "You Are My Sunshine," and that was that in the late 1920s and early 1930s, Jimmie Davis, before he became a hillbilly singer, recorded some of the most salacious, sexually charged music known to man. And by the way, let's see, I think I brought it with me. Within a few years, this is how Jimmie Davis was known as the nation's #1 gospel singer. So he went from singing this really the kind of music that you probably still couldn't play on the radio to singing gospel music. So he was always reinventing himself. But he recorded these songs: "High Behind Blues," "Red Nightgown Blues." There was another one. There was another one called the Organ Grinder Blues, and I'm not going to get into it. If you want to know more, come see me. But I'll just say this: that the organ that he's talking about grinding is not a musical instrument. And so, I mean, this, you can imagine in 1943, 44, if people were to hear some of these songs, they would be scandalized. And so some of his opponents, this is an ad that ran in the Advocate in January of 1944, saying indisputable proof that Jimmie Davis composed, recorded, and sang the salacious song "Bed Bug Blues." And this was a flyer that I love. It says for men, you can't read it, but it says for men only, and then right below it, do not allow this circular to be read by women and children. And then it has some of the lyrics of the songs. And so one of them, which is my favorite title of the song that he recorded very early in his career, was a song called "She's a Humdumdinger from Dingersville." And I'm going to play a little bit more of it than I normally would, because I want you to hear. He's talking about taking his girlfriend to church, and the preacher runs off with the girlfriend.
Talk about your girls, but you ought to see mine. She ain't so good looking, but she dressed so fine. She's long, she's tall, she's a handsome queen. She's got ways like a mowing machine. She's a humdumdinger from Dingersville. Ooh, watch her strut her stuff. I took her to church in my hometown. Preacher got hot and threw his Bible down. Says I've been a preacher long, long time. He can get yours, boys, I got mine. She's a humdumdinger from Dingersville. Do watch her strut her stuff.
So it was. There was one song that was called the "High Behind Blues" I showed earlier. And this is one of the lyrics: "No matter how big she is, I'm the man who can hold her down." And so that's the Humdumdinger. By the way, if you could find one of these copies, if you go search, if you got 78 records in the attic, that you could sell that thing for about $400. That's really about those records, those early blues, nasty blues records. Don't play them to your grandchildren, but those nasty blues records are really valuable today. But it was, again, that image that protected him, and also the fact that you couldn't actually play this stuff in public. Jimmie Morrison, who was congressman from the Florida parishes from this area, he went up to Shreveport on the Caddo Parish Courthouse, was going to play one of the songs and hoping to scandalize everybody in Shreveport and who didn't know about Jimmie Davis's history of recording these salacious music. And Davis's people found out about it, and they seated the audience with people and said, "Look, when Morrison starts playing the song, y'all start dancing." So they all started dancing, and Morrison threw the record into the crowd and stormed off. But they tried really hard to get the word out about this music, but it just wouldn't stick, because this image, people really wanted to buy and believe in the image of Jimmie Davis, the cowboy bard, the wholesome singer of the world's most popular songs, and songs that had brought a lot of acclaim to Louisiana. So when I started writing the book, I thought that Jimmie Davis was in the Country Music Hall of Fame. And by the way, Jimmie Davis was elected to the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1972. He was only the 20th person elected to the Country Music Hall of Fame. Before a lot of big names that you would think, wow, I can't believe that Jimmie Davis beat these people into the Country Music Hall of Fame. And the reason he was is because he was a founding father of country music. If it weren't for people like Jimmie Davis, Roy Acuff, the Carter family, Jimmie Rogers, Tex Ritter, people like that in the early days of when country music was just called hillbilly, when no one took it seriously, when there was no money to be made in it, when people like Jimmie Davis had to get elected to public office in Shreveport and make all their band members police officers just to support their music. Country music would not be the worldwide juggernaut that it is today without Jimmie Davis. So I always thought that Jimmie Davis was a one-hit wonder who got into politics because he just used music to get into politics, because that was the thing that was most important to him, was this one hit, and I'm going to parlay that into political success and spend the rest of my life in politics. And what I found out was just the opposite. Jimmie Davis lived to be 101 years old. He only spent like 13 years in elective office. He spent 70 years as a recording artist. The music was the most important thing to him. And it was the reason. It's the reason why it's the state song, is because he brought acclaim and notoriety to a state that really celebrated that really believed, and I think, my experience going around the state today, people still want to believe that we had this singing governor who wrote this great famous song. The book for me was a way. What I discovered, I started out just, it was just going to be, how did this song become the state song? And I was delighted to find was I was able to tell the story of early country music through the lens of this famous song. I was able to tell the story of Louisiana politics, especially in the 1940s, which I don't think has been written about nearly enough, through the lens of this song. It gave me, as I said, a new appreciation for Jimmie Davis, who I thought, as I said, was a one-hit wonder. And that's why Jimmie Davis is in the Hall of Fame, because he truly is a founding father of country music. And that's why Sunshine is more than a nice lullaby that we sing to our children. It's truly a part of our state's political and cultural history. Thank you very much, and I'd love to answer any questions you might have about any of this. Yes, sir.
Two-part question.
Yep.
Use the microphone. Use the mic. Send it right here. Send it. Two-part question, please, Bob. Who was his opponent in 44, and was he perceived as being a long or an anti-long?
Oh, very good question. Who was his opponent in 1944, and was he perceived as a long or anti-long? Well, he had a bunch of opponents. His major opponents were Earl Long and Jimmy Morrison, the mayor of Shreveport, Sam Caldwell, and a couple of other people. But it was really Earl Long and Jimmy Morrison, and mostly Earl Long. And boy, that was a really interesting race. Earl Long also knew about the salacious music and played it for some preachers in the New Orleans area. And he was disappointed when they said, "Praise the Lord, Jimmie Davis has been converted. He doesn't sing that stuff anymore." They just could not get a break. They could not get a break. Sorry, the other part was.
If it was a long or an anti-long.
Okay, yeah. So the beauty of Davis was that he was neither fish nor fowl. He was neither a long nor an anti-long. And part of it was because he didn't really have much of a political identity. He didn't have any strong political positions, but he got along well enough with some of the longs and got along well enough with the anti-longs. I mean, Sam Jones, the reform governor who had preceded him, talked him into the race. So he was probably seen by a lot of people as being more of an anti-long, but he was from Long's part of the state. He was from Shreveport. He knew a lot of those people, and so they trusted him. I think his campaign slogan, "Peace and Harmony," meant music. Harmony, I think it implied music, but it also meant that the acrimony of the 15 previous years of Huey Long and all the anti-longs fighting each other, and this was on the heels of the Louisiana scandals in 1933 when a lot of the former Long people went to prison. That's, by the way, the subject of my next book. But people were tired of this, and so Jimmie Davis sort of promised them peace and harmony. We're just all going to get along, and I think that was the source of a lot of his strength, was people were just tired of the bickering between longs and anti-longs. Good, very good question. Thank you.
Bob.
Yes, sir. Hey, Ralph.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
This was great, thank you. Can you tell us, getting away from music, I know in Baton Rouge there's never been any controversy about bridges. Can you talk about a little of the controversy about the Sunshine Bridge?
Yeah. Well, so the Sunshine Bridge, he started the Sunshine Bridge in his second term. He served 1944 to 48. Earl Long replaced him, went back to the Longs. People didn't want reform. They didn't like reform. And then he gets elected again in 1960, and toward the end of the term, they started construction on the Sunshine Bridge, or really, they started kind of the middle of the term. It wasn't actually finished until after he left office, but it was very controversial, and he took a lot of grief about it. It was seen as a vanity project. They called it the Sunshine Bridge because I think legally they couldn't name it after a person, so they called it Sunshine Bridge, which was clearly a bridge named after Jimmie Davis, right? But it was a toll bridge, and tolls weren't very popular, and people thought it was just a boondoggle. But there wasn't a bridge across the river from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. You know, it's ferries running across the river. It was really hard. So I think that bridge, that's one of the best things he did as governor was build that bridge, because it really sparked industrial development up and down the river, made it easier for people to get across the river at Donaldsonville, and it really, he got a lot of grief for it. But I think he deserves a lot of credit for the vision of building that bridge, even if it probably was 90% of it for him was a vanity project. Yes, sir.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I got a lot out of that as a musician. Were there any other recordings of that song, You Are My Sunshine?
By other artists?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
No,
By Jimmie Davis? Yeah, absolutely. He recorded a number of different times. In fact, in the movie in 1947, when he was his last year as governor, he went to Hollywood and made a biopic movie, a movie about his life, where he sang a bunch of his songs, and he recorded "You Are My Sunshine" again, a much more country version of it. And in fact, if you heard Davis on the stump in 1944 and beyond, it would have been a much more countrified version of the song, with steel guitars and fiddles and that kind of thing, and not the horn, that kind of thing. But yeah, he recorded it a number of times over the years, and it's been recorded by just about everybody, over the years too. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Bob, why is there that one term between his two terms? What happened, and what's the story there?
So you could not, until we changed the Constitution for John McKithen in the late '60s, the governor couldn't succeed himself. So he had to sit out a term before he could run again. Yeah.
So, question over here. You mentioned Sam Jones already, in one of your other answers, but I know he's influential in getting Davis to run. But Sam Jones later was interviewed, and he basically said the reason that he's never ran for office again was he lost his coalition. And he kind of blamed a lot of that on Jimmie Davis. So I guess this is like a two-part question. First, is that part true? Second, is much of the reason he lost the coalition because Davis was the absentee governor?
Yeah, I think so. Davis was an absentee governor. He was gone from the state over 200 days during his 4 years. He claimed it was weekends and holidays. But it was a lot of days. He went to Hollywood, to New York to record. He made a movie. He was always taking the band around, playing. Left the country a few times to go concert tours. And he was gone so much. There was a fund that paid the lieutenant governor a little extra every day, because when the governor left the state, the lieutenant governor became the acting governor, was entitled to the governor's salary for those days. Within a couple of years, the fund had depleted itself. It was running, I think, a $2,000 deficit. He was gone a lot. Yeah.
So my question kind of ties in with that. We hear all about the music that he's known for. Is there any legislative initiatives, good governmental, anything that came out?
Well, I write in the book about I think his second term did not bring a lot of glory to him or the state, because it was mostly known for his support of segregation, particularly trying to prevent the desegregation of New Orleans schools. And the song, because Davis became so associated with segregation, the song became associated with segregation. The song became the anthem of a well-known racist segregationist governor. And I talk about in the book how many people were deprecating the song along with Jimmie Davis. You know, and so it really, the song was heard. And it's so ironic that in 1962, that's when Ray Charles decides to record this two volumes of albums of country music called Modern Sounds of Country and Western Music, the first million-selling country music songs in the genre by a black artist. And the only of all the 12 songs on that album that Ray Charles actually rewrote the music to was You Are My Sunshine. But he recorded You Are My Sunshine, and it became the biggest hit of You Are My Sunshine of all the recordings. And the way I describe it in the book is that was a musical sit-in. That was a musical protest. He said, you know, I'm going to take your song from you. I'm going to trespass on your song, and I'm going to make it mine, and I'm going to give it a rebirth. And after Ray Charles records the song in 1962 and it becomes a big hit, black artists start recording the song again. And Jimmie, you know, to his credit, Jimmie Davis wasn't insulted by this because he made a lot of money off Ray Charles's recording. Okay, yeah, next question? Yeah.
What about the new governor's mansion? Didn't he build it?
He built the new governor's mansion, and that was another. He took a lot of grief for that. You know, it hadn't been all that long. So people were still around who remember Huey Long demolishing the previous governor's mansion and building it, and so building a new governor's mansion was a really controversial thing, and he got a lot of grief for that because it was a true mansion, and it is. It's a very nice home. But yeah, that would at the time people would not have considered it one of his proud achievements. He got a lot of grief for that. Yeah. I think now we're going to have David Summers come forth, and he's going to play "You Are My Sunshine." We're going to sing our way out of here.
This is trumpet professor from Southern University, Craig Heinzen.
This is going to be the 2025 version of this. Bill Grimes, you may know him as the jazz band director at LSU for a long time. Did this arrangement yesterday. Right?
And this is a Dr. John New Orleans jazz piano kind of arrangement. So, I'm a church organist, but I'm going to play this for y'all now. All right.
Which this goes out to Bill, too.
Yeah.
Right? This arrangement has never seen the light of day. I don't know if we can live up to all the excitement of other arrangements. Well, look at the world premiere of this particular